This is one of many webinars that we've had in the course of the last 2 years. We hold these webinars every month. We look for trendy topics in the field of human resources management or people management, and we have discussions that can help us gain fresh insights to help us work better, but more importantly, stay abreast with the happenings of the world of work. So a very warm welcome to everyone. So let's see where everyone is coming in from today. Feel free to pop it in the chat. You have any questions as we delve into the topic of today, feel free to ask in the chat as well. I'll be looking through the chat, monitoring the conversations, and making sure that in as much as we learn, we have a good time here. Today, joining me, and I will just tell you a brief about what will be, the format for today's particular session. I will be looking at the topic on remote work. In fact, particularly the return to office debates with regards to how, it's been 2 years since we've been managing the remote work scenario. For a lot of us before the pandemic, remote work was a dream, a vision, a place that we hadn't really thought that we were able to go. But in the last, three years, it's become the norm. A lot of organizations have adopted the hybrid approach. But more and more, we're seeing that we're still figuring it out. There's still challenges. And then there's been an interesting, more recent times, there's been some interesting behaviors that we're seeing. We're seeing that a lot of organizations are recalling back their staff. A very interesting one was Zoom a couple of months ago, where Zoom recalled their staff, and everyone was like, wow, if Zoom can ask their staff to return back to the office, then what's the hope for everyone else? So we'll be looking at, remote work in general, the benefits of it, and then what has happened since the pandemic, really, what's the position? And then we'll be examining those recent happenings. We'll be looking at some of the recent insights based on employee and CEOs on, what CEOs are thinking based on a more recent survey that has just come out by KPMG. And we'll be looking at what the workforce actually thinks. And we'll be looking at how we can marry the opinions and the thoughts of the people who are obviously working and the people managing the workforces of today. And then joining me after we look at those insights will be Deji Olowe, CEO and founder of Lens Square. He'll introduce himself when we start, but let me just do a little bit of introductions around the topic, and then we'll just take it from there. And anyone who has questions, please feel free to pop your questions or contributions in the comment section. Right, so I just want to make sure everyone can see my slides, and if you can see it, just say yay. And if you can't see it, well, say something, because it's always the effigy that goes wrong. Yeah, so sweet and short, what we'll be discussing for 1 hour would be looking at the trends, just like I said. Where are we now since the pandemic? What's our current reality, employees' opinion versus on return to office versus the CEO's opinion? We'll look at our reality. We'll look at the companies that are requesting return to office, and maybe try and examine some of the reasons. And please feel free to pop in your own thoughts, your own opinions. What's your organization doing? What has been the policy? How do you feel about remote work if you've been working remotely? And if you're somebody who has been asked to return back to the office, how are you feeling about it? Or are you someone who is even tired? Like, you know what, remote work is not remote work, it's not working, so let's go back. So why the return to the office? And then lastly, I'll look at strategies to increase engagement and productivity while actually working remotely. So just stay tuned with me, and we'll just examine some of those trends, some of those statistics, and some of those peculiar, very peculiar to the remote work narrative and the remote work conversation is the benefits of remote work. What are the biggest benefits of remote work where you are? For me, one of the biggest benefits are definitely around talent acquisition. The fact that we are no longer restricted to a 30-mile radius. To me, that's a big thing. That's something that I have benefited from immensely, not having to worry. There used to be a time, if you're based in Lagos, Nigeria, there used to be a time that where you lived was so key. And I would look at people who lived, at the other side of town or outside of town, and they would just seem so distant. But those restrictions are off in terms of talent acquisition, so that huge ability to tap into talent anywhere in the world, not local at all, is a big one. So the ability to have a flexible schedule. Most of you, if you work remotely, you'll probably be at home or in some space that is not necessarily your home space. So those benefits, I want to believe a lot of the workforce, a lot of people, especially remote work is much more inclusive. I believe that we know that. If you have a family and you definitely want to be very much involved in caring for that family, I believe that remote work is a very good option. If you have some form of disability, I believe that remote work is something that is definitely great for you. Not to talk about commuting. Several things about commuting. Of course, it's cheaper to, but I'm not even sure whether it's cheaper anymore, because I think, I noticed, yes, one is not going to the office, but my electricity bills are home on another level altogether. But yes, not having to, time is money. So it's not just about spending time on transportation. It's also the fact that you don't have to, worry about the commutes. You don't have to be tired. I know a lot of people who used to be really tired before they got to the workplace. And, if you're in some parts of town, depending on where you're dialing in from, it might take you a couple of hours to get to work. So there's that ability to spend time with your family, to be more energized. I see a lot of people, there's a gym right next to my house. And honestly, I've never seen that gym so full. Like, they had to close it down. They refurbished it to expand it, because the gym subscription, this gym has always been there, but now I want to believe a big part of people working from home is that they can do other things, because the gym, I noticed from 7 a.m. to like even 10, like the gym is really full. So I want to believe that they're benefiting from that. People have started, obviously they're not going to the office, they're taking care of themselves in other ways. And, so that those abilities, so those are some of the bigger benefits. And of course, on the business side, we can't, reduce real estate costs. It's a morale boost. People feel like they're more in control. So in some regard, there's that employee retention, to me, is a big one, because I want to believe that when people have more control and flexibility, and I have seen it in my own organization, it goes a long way to retain employees. So I think I don't need to sell the benefits anymore, because I believe that a lot of us have gained from this in one way or the other. But I need to be balanced. It's not all fun and games. We do know that there's a lot of struggles with remote work. There are challenges. There are big challenges. This is based on a survey that was done, near at the time of the lockdown, but I believe that it's still very relevant. A big issue still remains, especially in developing countries, is infrastructure, around infrastructure. Internet connectivity is still a big issue. Like I hear people who says the transformer in my area is not working. That's a problem in itself. So internet connectivity, power is very expensive all over the world. Energy bills have just gone crazy. Then at home, distractions, Right now, I am at home. I'm just praying that my children don't hear my voice and just slam and come in, and even though I've locked the door, but my son wants to speak to me now. He's going to like knock and keep knocking, right? So there's just that thing with distractions in the home. We can't take that away, and not everyone has a space as well. A space is a big issue in the term, in sense of, we're also used to like going to the office, but not everyone has the ability to carve out a space in their house. And I particularly like senior level and CEO people to understand that, especially when you have a workforce who are mostly millennial or Gen Z. Bear in mind that you may have a study, as the CEO or the senior leader in your team, you might have a room you've carved out, But bear in mind that these younger people that you work with do not have that luxury. You don't know where they're working on. They might be working on the floor. They might share a room. They don't own the power. It's not their generator. It's not their, infrastructure. So those are some of the things. They're peculiar to developing countries, but those are some of the things I like to make people aware of, that the physical workspace is a big distraction because it can be optimized for everyone, and it's still a problem for a lot of people. Not so that's on the physical and the infrastructure side, but some of the challenges still remain the mental health side. The social isolation is still an issue. We're still seeing it. People, after a couple of days, when I stay at home, I just feel like, I start feeling like my brain is getting a bit clogged, and I feel the need to want to, go out and meet people, because it's still a thing. And, the thing about all of this is that we are still figuring it out. It still hasn't panned out in full. We are still, overall, what I've noticed from the research, because I've done a lot of research on this area. If you follow me, even personally, I'm researching on remote work. What I find is that generally people say that the remote work is overall, it's positive. However, it's not without its concerns. So what has been happening after the pandemic, right? So what is happening on the employee side? The employees would prefer to return to the office or at least work hybrid. It's interesting data. So generally, people are preferring to, even employees, not 100% remote. There's this hybrid drive. Like, people think that hybrid is like the best of both worlds. And I mean, I think you tend to agree in the sense that, of course, fully remote has its benefits, but where you're able to be, you have the possibility, you're not too far away from the office, then it's not a bad idea to actually come in or arrange some kind of, like, come to the office for a couple of days, a week. So the worldwide figures are showing us, and I think I have two different reports here. We'll be sharing the slides, so please watch out for the slides. You're going to get the slides so that you can look at these and examine them, much more closely. So you can see that, of course, during the pandemic, remote was so much, like the fully remote, but it's gone down. So it's about half of the workforce now is doing, fully remote, and half is fully remote and hybrid, and then about half is so the figures have dropped dramatically, because of course a lot of businesses could not sustain that remote work or even hybrid, depending on the nature of your business. But what are employees? What are their thoughts? What is the data telling us? So these are more recent surveys. What are employees' opinions on hybrid, based on generation? I think if you look at the data, well, I'm not really too surprised. Different generations have different opinions. So when it comes to Gen Z, millennial, and then the Generation X, what does the data look like? Who prefers, you can guess, but I'm looking at the data here. Who do you think prefers to be full-time in the office? Who has the highest full-time? When I look at it, the full-time is those in blue. If you look at the right-hand side, I think it's about the same across generations. So full-time in the office, about 13% on average, yeah. But when it comes to 1 to 2 days per week, right? Of course, in terms of per week, then we have I would say the Gen Zs, want to spend about 1 to 2 days a week, right, in the office. But then we have 3 to 4 remote days per week. We have it. Who has the largest? I would say it's the millennials. I don't know reasons why, but I could almost guess. Obviously, the millennials are slightly older than Gen Z. Yeah, and I think people who maybe are going into that part of their life where maybe they're pursuing other things, from family to maybe business ventures, or, because this is a reality, whether we like it or not, or they have some other priorities, or even if it's social or if it's economic, whatever it is, we'll probably think about staying at, working at home more than working in the office. But when you look at it, generally, I see from this data, it's looking more or less consistent. But what is actually surprising is that it's even the Generation X that would prefer the full-time remotes. I wonder why. I can only guess what the reason is, but I think by and large, the data is telling us that people prefer to work hybrid, and I am not surprised by that data. However, I think this was one that surprised me, the CEOs, and I think it surprised a lot of us. I know that the hybrid, yes, it's kind of like we've gotten into it, but the number of CEOs that are saying that this return to office is going to be like about 64% believe that there will be a full return to office in 3 years' time. I've spoken to a number of CEOs, and they're of the opinion that, come on, don't worry, enjoy this remote hybrid thing in a couple of years. So this is what the average CEO is thinking. Over 50%, a whole 60% is saying that in 3 years, don't worry, we'll be back to the office. This remote work would be a phase. It will be something behind us. And almost 90% are also saying that they are likely to reward the people who make effort to come into the office. And these have always been some of the concerns of people working hybrid and remote, is that they feel that with regards to performance and rewards and recognition, that you're less recognized when you're not in the office. And I just want to use the example of, let me just talk about the Zoom, because I know that when Zoom actually, the remote work, when they asked the return to office, but sometimes you don't hear the full story. They didn't say everyone come back to the office. No, but that's the way it was made to seem. They said if you're within a 50-mile radius, right, try to be in the office. I mean, they gave stipulated times, but people who are beyond the 50-mile radius don't have to be in the office. So the rule was basically, again, they were not eliminating remote work. They just said if you if you live within a 50-mile radius, try and make it to work, at least this number of times a week. So those were some of the things that we could. So who is saying return to office? Yes, a lot of the big names who people did not expect. And anytime they come and say return to the office, it's like, ooh, big news. Oh, Zoom said it, Uber said it, Facebook has done it, Citigroup, and they're just a mix from entertainment to financial services to, the tech that people were thinking like, oh no, tech have got it. But I want to believe that there's a reason why CEOs are thinking this way. And there is, obviously they've looked at things, and some of those reasons and motivating factors around it, a recent survey by SHRM, in just very recently in June, right, about return to office plans. So why are they asking for? Majority are because of this in-person collaboration and teamwork. Somehow, and this is what the data is telling us, and this is what some of the CEOs have said, and some of the team leads and the managers. Every time you hear return to office and somebody really pushing for it, it's usually a manager or a CEO who somehow feels that, that teamwork or that collaboration is not happening as effectively. People are concerned about workplace culture, because culture is an issue in traditional office. And then when it's remote, if you have to be deliberate and intentional in the office, then just imagine how intentional you have to be when it's remote. So workplace culture and employee engagement is a big issue. Driving engagement, because we were still tackling engagement in the traditional office. We were still trying to figure it out and try to, improve employee experience and, because the business case for engagement is very, very clear. However, it's remote work. Imagine we were still figuring it out, and what is now going to happen in remote work? So, and then of course you have leadership preferences. Imagine somebody who has been used to going to the office, and the office is their identity, all those suits they bought, the skirt suits, the ties, their briefcases and all those office things. It's difficult people have their preferences. You were used to what made you, how would they know you're a banker? The whole point was that you got into your car, you went, your street people know your profession, I can imagine that it will take some getting used to because a big part of people's identities with work is what they do. And then of course there's this desire to, they feel like it's not a normal situation. So there's this desire to like restore the sense of normalcy again. It looks as if the whole pandemic thing was just, it was very abnormal. It happened for a reason. So there's this desire to like get back to the way things were. And then of course there are employee productivity concerns. Employee productivity concerns are a big one. So these are the motivating factors. I mean, it's not surprising that, these are the motivating. And I think they're good reasons. They're very, very good reasons for anyone to say, you know what, because if I felt like productivity was falling or collaboration or culture we were not getting it right, then I could understand why people as a leader, a business leader, would have concerns on it. But people don't want to come back. People don't want to come back to the office. A lot of people have gotten used to it. I can only imagine people who were inducted and oriented in remote work. I imagine anybody who started their career in 2020. Just imagine, this is all they know. So they don't even know how they never have known or experienced how it is to actually go to the office every day. So in as much as, and we're creatures of habit, so they're just, different things. But I do know that engagement and productivity is a big, it's a big issue with remote work. Because how do you enhance or maintain engagement in remote work? How do you ensure that, employees are still engaged? I mean, we're in a session now. I mean, before this, I was in a training session at between 9 and 11 this morning. Once people are online, like some of the class were there, but like majority were like online. Like, how are they even there? Like, what strategies can we employ? Because we can't lie, it's difficult. Engagement is much harder in remote work than in traditional office. It's much harder. I mean, it's bad enough when we're in the office, but you can just imagine the difficulty. Yeah. So these are just some strategies. Like I said, I'm sharing this in the slides. Moving on to our guest speaker here, or like it's a conversation, not guest speaker. So that I'm going to ask Deji some questions around, how he's managing his team. I know he has a fully remote team, but I know his career was not fully remote. And I know he sits on the board of companies that are not necessarily fully remote. So I just want to talk to him about his perspective. But I want everyone to look at some of these strategies that have come from research that I have done and research that, I've gathered from on how you can actually increase engagement in remote work. And if you want to deepen your understanding of remote work or engagement in remote work, please feel free to reach out to me on a one-on-one basis. I'm still researching engagement in remote work, and I'll be happy to give you tips on how you can help, because even though, like I said, return to office is a debate right now, however, teams are still working hybrid. So while people are hybrid, how do you at least keep them motivated? How do you keep them engaged? How do you ensure that engagement is still at high levels? I want to imagine what engagement figures are like for some organizations. Do you still, if you've done an engagement survey and you're running a remote team, can you share some of your insights? I'll be looking in the chat. So please, if you have any questions, this is a good time to ask based on what I've covered. Deji and I are going to just kick off a friendly conversation now, and just feel free to contribute. So I'm done with the slides now. I'm going to stop sharing, and I will give Deji the floor now. As a CEO founder, like, what's your opinion on what I've shared? Can you just tell me, what are you guys thinking? CEOs, founders, what's in your head? Can you just share and introduce yourself in a different way if I haven't introduced you properly? Over to you, Deji. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Adora. Good to welcome, speak with you and meet with you again. My name is Deji. Like Adora said, I'm the founder of LendSquare. We are a software as a service platform for lenders. Like she mentioned, I started out my career in time when there was nothing like remote, right? And where we used to wear suits and sometimes fat ties, and We used to visit customers. There was nothing like remote. Even you don't even do meetings with customer virtually. Like you have to visit the customer, endure the traffic and all that. So that's my background. But of course, obviously the world evolved and everybody's looking at things in a different way. And so here's where we found ourselves. I know, and because I've experienced both sides, and I'm even experienced all the sides. In fact, there are three sides to this thing: remote, in office, and hybrid. So, Adora, I think you should bring it on. Let's talk about this.
Okay, good. I mean, I know I've had conversations and banter with you over this, but I want to ask you specifically, maybe with regards to, what do you think about the statistics? I mean, what's your own opinion? 64% of CEOs are saying, you know what, in 3 years' time, all of you, we're looking at you, all be back in the office. What do you think? What's your own opinion?
Well, my opinion is that I think a lot will go back to in office, right? And the interesting part to say is that, see, only a tiny majority of work can be done remotely, right? So when people argue for remote or against remote, sometimes I don't join the conversation anymore, because the problem is that those who actually do the work most times are actually in the office. They don't even have the time to shout on Twitter about remote or not remote. Majority of work can be done remotely. Right. Now, it doesn't mean that any job that could be done remotely, then you have to go to the office. So if you are fortunate to work in sectors like yours, consulting, if you're fortunate to work in software like I am, then you could think that the world revolves around us. The world doesn't revolve around us. So I would say that probably still 99% of work will still be in person, because there's nothing about it. Right?
And it's interesting because that perspective you made, it means like we're probably the people, like when I mean we, I'm talking about knowledge workers, software design, consulting, we're probably the ones shouting, right? Whereas the reality on ground, if you look at the workforce in general, a lot of work cannot be done remotely. So the privileged are the ones using their privilege, right? And there's, shouting, but how do you face reality? Because even some people here, I'm sure they have businesses they're doing in production. Are your staff at home? Right? The bank can say yes. Like if you have a store or a shop, and those shops cannot close down. I mean, yes, people have online stores, but a lot of the stores, the market is not going to, like of course some people do online, but all of the markets can't. Yeah.
Even the online stores have people managing the stores, the inventory and the rest of them. And then somebody's delivering those things to the house. Those are people, right?
Yeah.
Those things don't happen magically. So I feel like the remote workers, even though I work remotely, I feel they live in a bubble and they make a lot of noise, which I think is kind of shifting, this perspective that remote is so important. The truth is, it's not as important as we think.
That's a very, I don't know, like people have different opinions. Please feel free to share in the chat. This is a very interesting, so you don't think it's going to be permanent. I think your perspective is like, it's just a small minority of people really. So when we think about permanent, it's really just about a small minority. We're blowing it out of proportion, right? I mean, is that what
Absolutely, and it's not, and it's not even a small minority, it's a tiny minority. All you need to do is sit down and list out all the jobs that people do, and just by yourself start ticking out which ones can be done remotely. You will be very surprised how few things can be done remotely. Right, that's the truth. Very few. From the drivers, from the cleaners, for those who work in restaurants, for those doctors, for those who work in shops, those who work in factories, those who build houses, farm workers. Like you take on the list on and on. And then you wonder, like, then who can then? Police, right? A lot of people working with government, they are police. They control traffic. And, so that's the way it is.
So that must be Adora's network.
For me, my own perspective about remote work is nuanced, in the sense that I feel like remote work should sit in within the context of the work being done. From my point of view, like literally 90% of or more of jobs can be done remotely. So there's no need to see it that way. But knowledge workers, like Adora mentioned, sometimes think the world will revolve around us. And then we tend to think about remote like as if it's a right? And this is something that just came into being from the realities of COVID. So that for me is the reality of this work. Now, working remotely comes to its own benefits, right? It's pretty good. You roll out of the bed in the morning, you don't have to dress up, you don't have to do anything, and then you can start working within 5 minutes. And then you finish work in the evening, and you can also just shut down for the day without to get into traffic. So I feel like those are significant benefits that we can't take away. You also can work from anywhere. So sometimes when I get tired, I just change location and work for weeks, sometimes months away from home. Now you can only do that if you are working remotely. Remote is also cheaper, like she mentioned from the statistics, is significantly cheaper. You don't have to get into traffic. You don't have to even buy too many clothes. You don't have to buy makeup if you're a woman. You don't have to do a whole bunch of things, which makes life easy for you. So cost of remote is very, very high. But remote has its own its own challenges as well. I don't know whether there's a time to take a few questions when we're waiting for Adora.
Yes, we have questions in the chat I would like you to address.
Okay, do you want to read them out for me?
Yes. So first question, how do you measure performance in a hybrid remote work setting? How do you
Measuring performance in hybrid is actually easier because you could use the remote, the in-office process, but measuring performance in a remote organization can be very difficult. Now, it depends on the job. Jobs like sales, very simple. Sell, your target is 100 million, meet your target, nobody cares. But when you look at jobs that are like, they're nuanced, you're a product manager, you're a consulting person, it can be quite difficult because the effort you put in sometimes doesn't produce the instant result. And if you just base people based on result alone, then it can be quite challenging. It can be quite demoralizing if you don't get the kind of result. Now, in a proper office, your boss, your manager will probably see you put in that effort. So it means that they can at least reward you for the effort and the attitude and the game you bring, the attitude you bring to the game. So doing performance evaluation in remote can be quite difficult. So it requires that the HR, the executive, actually come up with metrics that can recognize that, right? But I know that the difficulty of effort alone can be challenging because sometimes you can't see the effort. Are they putting the right effort? Are they doing the right thing? So this is where the challenge is coming from. So this is from a strategy point of view, every organization will have to figure out what is important, right? And then put in that thing. But it can, for a remote organization, it can't be effort alone because it's difficult to measure. It's still going to be some sort of results that may not be based on the final outcomes alone, but can be some of those results you can see, intermediate results to use to make worker performance decisions.
Okay, I think that's clear on that. Thank you. There is one other question this same person asked. Said, how do you ensure staff are working? I think that's one of the key questions people also have.
Okay, so I will tell you some of the things I've done, right? And I don't know, frankly, I don't know if that will work across every organization. But before I tell you about what I've done, let me give you an idea of what some global organizations do. So global organizations, sometimes they issue your laptop, they have activity monitoring software on the laptop. They know when you open it, they know when you close it, they know where you're going. A lot of people sometimes push back and say, oh, this is intrusive, but in reality, you can't say that because the laptop belongs to the organization and you are being paid for the time you're spending. That's what some people do. On the other side, some people will say, let's work on output. We don't care how you work, right? But then what do you do when the output is not done? For us at Lensquare, I think it's a little bit nuanced. We've designed some of the processes to be such that it's easy to know when people are putting in effort, right? And because it's also a remote organization, some of these things are designed around frequent check-ins, to show the status of where you are regarding the kind of work you do. So for some teams, for example, they drop stand-ups or updates in the morning, and then they do it in the evening, and then you could see whether something's being done or not. Right? We don't track anybody because I feel like when you track people, it can have a kind of negative impact on morale when somebody's checking whether you are working every 5 minutes, because sometimes people also have to pitch in and go beyond the call of duty. So if you are tracking every minute, then it also means you have people that may not be connected. So that's how we work. But I don't think that individual tracking, from my point of view, I think is too intrusive. It may be counterproductive.
That's insightful. Thank you for that, sir. So Adora is here. I think she's joining with her phone. So Ma, do you want to take over? Okay, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yep. I was just going to say I was muted.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's always the effigy that goes. Nah, it's always the effigy that goes wrong. So yes, I mean I was listening in it. Those were, I love what you said about monitoring software, and it's really true. Like, people just have different opinions with respect to monitoring software. Sometimes people think it's intrusive. But I've seen a lot of people say that it's necessary, because monitoring is something, actually the research has shown that monitoring is key for remote work effectiveness and engagement. Quite a number of employees in the research have said that, they're being monitored, not necessarily software, please don't get me wrong, but being monitors helps to keep them engaged. So monitoring is important. And now the type of monitoring is now another, obviously, that's another ball game altogether, but it is necessary. No one should think that when you work remotely, it means that you are allowed to do what you want when you want it. Some sort of like monitoring for performance management is definitely essential. So yes, let's get on to the next question. Fatima, just help me with the next question, because I can't really see the questions well on my phone. I'm still trying to log on. Thank you. Hello.
I think Fatima is muted.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking. Let's just look through the chat. Yeah.
Hello, Adora, you may have to mute because you're on two devices.
Yeah, let me
take.
Okay, I've taken it off. Yeah, I was logged on 2 places. So just to check the chat again for the questions. I think the questions are trying to see what is in the chat. Can you help me with questions in the chat? I'm trying to put the chat. Okay, so there's a question from Ogechi that says, for an organization that's on fully remote work, are employees restricted by location? Because I hear you say something about knowing where they are. Please correct me if I got you wrong. Yeah. Are they restricted by location? Yes.
No, no. So here's the thing. Like the benefit of remote also means that as an organization, you can employ wider than your local catchment area, right? So now, if you are remote and you are okay, so for example, I'm here in Lagos, and then I have staff that work in Kaduna, I have staff that work in Abuja, I have people working in Ogun State in the East. Obviously, that's the benefit of being remote, because it makes no difference whether we live in Lekki together or you are far away. Now, that also goes into if you want to do hybrid or you want to move away from remote. So if you move away from remote, for example, all those benefits, being able to reach people farther away, is going to be impossible. And then the only interesting thing here is that if you now say, oh, those who live near have to come to work and those who are farther away don't have to come to work, then I don't know, sometimes I feel maybe that becomes hypocritical, because what is different? Like, they are all people, they are all staff. Why do people farther away not have to come to work? What is it that the nearer you are to the office, the less productive you are unless you come to the office? These are some of the questions we actually may be asking ourselves even much more again.
Okay, there's another question. This is about Victor, an IT support guy. He says he's had the experience of working remotely, but his work is now more on sites, supporting branches. Says he prefers working remotely. Okay. So he doesn't have an issue, it's a comment. He doesn't have an issue with monitoring software, is what he's saying. Yeah, so I'm just trying to look for, is there any other question? Because I don't have access to all the previous questions. So
nice. Like my cousins are
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So just people generally agreeing. Okay, so Tokma is saying that remote work is alien in his place of work, despite the numerous benefits. Management will never consider it. Well, I don't know. What type of business is yours, Tokwe? I mean, just like Deji has mentioned, well, he's trying to make us have some kind of reality check. I mean, maybe we've made too much noise about remote work. He's saying that, you know what, it's not all like, we're just not even a small minority. Deji's saying that remote workers are really a tiny minority. And maybe that could be also because maybe like the knowledge firms, the IT firms, the tech firms, they're all in, I mean, they're the remote work. So I think they're just making noise because they're good, they're on Twitter, right? So they will make noise. But as we've been led to believe that, yes, for a lot of organizations, maybe the question is, Tokwe, is it right for your organization? Is it an option for your organization? And maybe if it's not the best option, then you can't really blame the management for not adopting it. Yes. Okay. Someone is showing me a question, but I can't see the rest of the question. Remember, I can't scroll up. So if you can paste the question back, because I can't see it. Right.
Oh,
so
okay. Maybe I could help here. I think somebody called IP. Yeah, say I've been working remotely for about 3 years. And my CEO wants to get back to the office in the next 1 or 2 months. Are there transition tips you can advise?
Ooh.
So transition tips is let me tell you, going back to the office sometimes can be like getting off crack. It's going to be it's going to be quite difficult because
look, you speak from experience. This example
I play the faith. Now, so here's the thing, right? Let's look at the practicality of this. So let's say you work with Adora, for example, and your work starts at 9 and you end at 6. You could wake up at 8 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
And just take a shower. You don't need to dress up, no makeup, no nothing. And then 8:45, you're already waiting for Adora to get in. Now, if that were what we're doing, now imagine you have to get back to the office and you live in, say, mainland, and Adora is in VI. You probably have to wake up at 5. You have to get on the road by 6. If you get on the road by 7, you won't get to the office until the next day. You have to dress up, you actually also be open. Nobody robs you on the way. If you're driving, nobody bashes you. You don't have to queue for petrol. Look, it's the logistics of getting back to the office is just crazy, right? So transition tips, I can just tell you to just, you just have to be strong. After a while, we're Nigerians, we are very adaptive, should be okay with it. And then you forget you ever work remotely. But then what I could say would be, you also have to look at what is making the CEOs to tell people to get back to the office. Look, CEOs, founders are business people, right? They may like you and call you family, but let me be frank with you, if the company doesn't make money, everybody's on the road. The question is, can we look at the reasons why they're asking people? Because if they're saying that at the time they try remote, performance dipped, loyalty went south, then they will be very stupid to want to continue that journey. So you may want to first ask them, like, okay, what's the problem? How do we design a better approach? And instead of saying fully all remote, you could say, can we do hybrid? Can we come to work twice a week and then work 3 times in the office? And then you could also try to see if they could gamify it. If a team is doing very well, maybe they could earn the right to do 1 more day at home. And then maybe they could lose their rights to work from home. That's where everybody knows that your ability to work from home is a function of the maturity and how you deliver at work. So that could help. So Ivy, please don't go back to the office to fight. You have to use wisdom to manage your bosses.
And it's interesting, Deji, that you say this, because I know that there was, and this is a real situation that I'm privy to. The minute they said return to the office for a particular person, the person starts sharing their CV because they were looking for another job that was remote. Like, that was the reaction and the response for them. They're like, they can't go back. So they were just like sending their CV. They're looking for another job because they just can't see themselves going back there. But I love the angle that you brought in, is that you really need to ask yourself whether it's the best for the business. And I know that with all CEOs, there's always a business case. Can you show performance? Can you show productivity with remote work? Do people just want to see bodies in the office? Is it for the sake of just seeing them, or is there something driving that return to office policies? There must be something. And a big point to note, and it's not just because you said it, Deji, because I say this to professionals, HR professionals as well. When the company is not, the best we can do for any company is to win, to help the company win, and to help the company do well, and to help the company perform. Because the minute the company is not doing well, there's nobody in the company, and everybody will leave, and all the employees even screaming and shouting, and everyone saying they will all be gone. Everybody will be without that job or without work. So the best we can do, if the company is winning, then fine. How can we help the company to continue to win? But if for any reason things are not going well, then all hands need to be on deck so that we still have a place to work. And we think, because if everyone has apathy and doesn't really care about the numbers or the success or the survival of the company, then the company is gone. And if the company is dead, then there's no work. So we're talking about remote work, but there won't be any work in the first place, because that company will be like history. So the focus really should be on productivity and performance, and what is, if those numbers are improving. But if for any reason remote work, maybe because of reasons, like I said, distractions, infrastructure problems, some people, self-discipline, I must mention, it has come up repeatedly in the research. A key competency for working remotely is self-discipline. If you are not self-disciplined, or you do not have a team that is self-disciplined, remote work cannot work. It is there. When you're looking out for people in your team to join remotely, if they can't work from home, if they're not disciplined, they will struggle. So those are some of the things that some CEOs and founders are looking at, because you have to build that discipline of execution to be able to work remotely effectively. And maybe if they feel they don't have a team that has built that discipline or has it innately, then return to the work. And just like Deji mentioned about gamifying, I have seen companies use remote work as reward. If you're not working remotely well, they call you back to the office, yeah, that's what they're doing. And then they coach you and they try to see. And if you don't seem to be able to, I know it might sound punitive, like, oh, people are not mature, but the truth is that everyone is not. Not everyone can work realistic. Some people need to be in the office, and some people need to be monitored really, like, in order for them to work effectively. Yeah, so I think we have another question. Someone says, how do you manage compromised technology in a environment? How do you manage compromised technology?
Thanks so much, right? And this is the hardest part, because when you work remotely, right, your entire office is actually technologically based. Because if you work in the office, let's say you work in the kitchen, your office tool is the cooker and the pots. Not easy to compromise.
Yeah.
So compromise is actually very scary. And it requires a lot of significant investment by every organization to keep things small. Now, for smaller organizations, right, they haven't seen this risk because they are not that big. But once you are big enough, you become target for hackers, or there's a benefit for even staff compromising the company itself. Yeah. So the truth is, there are few strategies you can put around this. But number one, first and foremost, if you build your own technology, you probably may have to use VPN for people to come in. Yeah. Number two, you may have to use, make sure you use tools, centralized authentication system, maybe like Google Workspace, which you use to connect to other things, and you can remove people. Then number three will be also have to put in the effort to actually watch the kind of traffic, what goes on and within your organization. Number four will be you give people access right to only what they need to work, right? But this can only help the truth is if you are in the office and when people are working from home, if they have funny brothers, funny friends, it can be quite difficult to know who actually have access to what, right? That is a real concern, right? So this is not even about what you call it, locking PCs or anything. If their family is compromised, it's extremely difficult for you to do this. So it's a lot of work. It's a big challenge, and it's actually one of the downsides to working remotely. It's so easy to get compromised, like extremely way easier than physical offices.
Yeah. And I know like it is actually, and there's benefits in small teams, but the minute your organization is a large team, just imagine like so many people dialing in. That would be a huge concern in terms of security risks, hacking, like things like that. So that's definitely very key. Do we have any more questions? I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. We still have a few minutes to go. So great contributions so far. Thank you. Okay, Adiola is saying that a recent survey is showing that employees are finding remote work very beneficial, whereas our leaders are feeling a weakened sense. I love that. I was just reading that and somebody else's, a weakened sense of team working, right? I think it's important to continue to keep a pulse on this and find a balance between what employees want and what the organization needs. Definitely a lot more effort has to be put into performance management. I really agree. I mean, you can see it there. It's almost like, I don't know what to say, whether leadership is feeling like they're losing a grip of things. But I just want it to be performance driven and results driven. I don't want it to be like, I just feel like I'm not in control, right? So I believe that all organizations need to look at their numbers. You don't call people back for the sake of calling people back, but if there's a real issue and the company is not doing well for any reason, and you do feel that collaboration and some of those, like team related metrics or engagement metrics have dipped, then it's a call for concern. But is coming back to the office going to solve it? Maybe, but
I may add some perspective to that. See, look, I'm a realist, right? Maybe I'm lucky, or maybe you are lucky because you are in HR, right? Consulting, so you get to see a lot. You are equipped to think like this, right? I've been on both sides. I used to do performance management in my previous life. I also equipped to slide it, but not everybody sees things this way. When you have a company, you have financial KPIs to meet, you have salaries to pay, you have bills to pay, and then everybody's just singing kumbaya about remote work. And you're thinking about, you sometimes look, so if you don't have those tools or maybe intellectual tools and experiences to be able to think in this way, the first thing I think about is survivor, because a dead company is a dead company. Nobody cares, absolutely. And also, one of the things that also happen is that the sense of entitlement that comes from staff sometimes can actually tick people off who have to work remotely. And then you're wondering, if the company is dead, where do you get paid? And one of the things you find is that when people go with this sense of entitlement, people sometimes CEOs are saying, we dare you, go and create your own company, work remotely and work the way you want. If you're able to make money, fine. You can come and tell us that we are stupid. And I've seen this thing happen over and over again. Most of the people that complain the most, right, it's just noise. They really can't transfer that, I'm very good, I can only work remote, to something that is productive outside the office. So some live in anger and they get to other places and they're also not able to contribute because all they do is complain. Once you're a staff and you can't see the bigger picture for your organization, and all you do is complain, then something's wrong. Truth is, if your CEOs are saying everybody must come to the office, prove to them that being remote or hybrid can actually be beneficial. Sit down with them, do the numbers, because when you ask people to come to the office, there are implications for the organizations as well. Staff are not as available as before. Staff are more exposed to danger and security issues. And then the cost of running an office is not, in our economy, there's no promo running. You have a diesel over 1,000 naira. You have office expenditure, rent, everything. They cost money. So when they're actually asking people to come back to the office, it's actually more expensive for them. So it's for us to go with humility and talk to our leaders, our CEOs, to say, you know what? I know you're upset. Can we do an experiment? Give us 1 month. Let us prove X or Y. Bring solutions to them instead of demonizing them. They pay the bills. They are the ones that look for the business. Adora, you know what it takes to land any client today. You will talk until blood is coming from your mouth. Even when they sign, you don't know whether they're going to wire that money. And yet somebody is feeling like, oh, if you ask me to come to the office, I'm not doing anything. Adora, you can't tell today if a client says come to the office, that's the only way you can land a deal. Will you thumb your nose at them and say walk away?
Oh yeah, I'll be there like 6 a.m.
Absolutely. Because that's what pays the bills. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I love your candor, and I'm sure that we can all appreciate it. Sometimes it's just good to hear the other side, because I think that we have heard one side, for a lot of times, since the pandemic, definitely. And we still hear the side, whether we like it or not. But, it's just good to make, ensure that we have a balanced conversation. I just want to read 1 or 2 comments and see there from Yemi. Yemi Ajayi is saying that, another perspective, the CEO's temperament could have actually influenced their preference between remote, in-office, or hybrid. For example, a faction of the CEOs that may likely be sanguine, and I believe sanguine is the outgoing personality type, would like to opt for remote work or even hybrid. Same temperament differences may influence the preferences. So it's saying that personality type would affect what do you think? Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely will, because you can have your preferences, but should we, even as a CEO, I think we should we still need to look at the numbers, because in as much as we have our preferences, I think any CEO can be convinced by what the numbers are saying, right? Just like you're saying, you're like, let's see what the data is telling us. I mean, we'll follow the data. That's a good one. Yeah, we're definitely sharing the slides. Deji, do you have, okay, I'll just read 1 or 2 and then you can wrap up, because it's almost 1 o'clock. Tululokpa is saying the current economic realities of an employee in an organization that doesn't value work from home. What's the best advice for that employee and organization?
So basically it's still numbers game. Why did you set up a company? To make money. How much is the company trying to make? That influences the staff and everything. So staff should sit down and say, okay, if the company is trying to make X amount, millions, please bear in mind that if the company was trying to make a revenue of $1 million, right?
Yeah.
If the target is still same in Naira, that revenue just went down half, right? If the target is same in dollars, that means everybody has to do double. And the expenses have actually increased. So these are the conversations that employees should be having with the organizations. What do we do? Are we paring down our expectations, or are we increasing our activities and outputs? That will decide whether it's going to be remote or not, or it's going to be hybrid. Because going to work means more pressure on the money being spent to keep the organization running. And going remote sometimes may mean the organization is not as efficient as it could be, right? So these are some of the realities. To be very frank, I don't know what advice to give everybody right now, beyond the fact that putting your best stay alive until after all this madness is over.
All right. So I'll just try and wrap up the last 2 questions in one. The first is about with the industry being the primary determinant of work, the work mode. What are your thoughts on that? And I believe that's what you said. It's industry specific, right?
Absolutely, it's industry specific. Some industry can be remote. There's nothing you can do about it.
Exactly.
Hospitals, restaurants, having shops, supermarkets is there. Some industry can be remote. Software, consulting, But then
Yes,
it's also a function of your client. If your client wants you to show up in the office,
yeah,
if you are working, for
exactly.
example, in a client office,
Yeah.
it becomes a choice of whether being alive, right, and in their office, or dead remotely.
Exactly. And then last question from Chioma is, like she feels, and this is one of the things, you remember, it's based on the data from CES, so some CEOs, that remote workers are sometimes seen as less important than the in-office. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that? Because the CEOs, 90% of them said they will reward the people they see. What do you think?
It's natural. So it's not about, so here's the thing, it's not about the CEOs, it's about being human, right? Humanity just favors connection, favors relationship, right? Even today, people talk about remote relationship. We all know that they don't work well sometimes, right? So here's the thing. If you have two people that are equally close to you and one is always there in person, body language, everything, you guys communicate more, and then one is remote, that's a risk that remote workers. So remote workers are only, I won't say, if everybody were remote, then you won't have a disadvantage. But once a portion of the organization is in person, the remote guy is always going to be at disadvantage. And it's based on communication. 45% of communication is what non-verbal. So it means that you literally have to communicate and engage 2x to even match the guy that is in the office, right?
Yeah.
So it's a reality that we all face.
So I think the question here, and the final question here from Ebube, is that is going back to the office really going to solve the concerns raised in that SHRM survey that showed the motivations for the CEOs wanting people back, like, teamwork, like lack of collaboration? I didn't really see numbers there. Was it performance? It was, like, I don't know. But is going back to the office going to solve those problems, Deji?
Frankly, I think it would, right?
Okay.
It will solve for those companies, but not going to the office, remote work actually creates opportunities that going to the office can create. So for example, if I were to be like in office company, I probably won't have some of the great people I have working with me today, because I will only be able to employ within a very small catchment area, right?
Yeah.
So remote work creates opportunities. But then the problems there, the problem of connection of culture, you can't walk away from it. So it's a trade-off, actually. So it's a reality I'm willing to live with.
Yeah. And I think it's a judgment call as well. And I think maybe that's why so many organizations do hybrid, because, there are just some problems, especially with your customers. If you're client facing, I'm just speaking, Ebube is on my team. Ebube, the issue that we had with a client last week, how I had to, I rushed there, I had to rush to their office. Imagine, would I have been able to solve it remotely? When they were saying, this was going to be major, right? You saw how quick I was there the next day, spent 1 hour with the clients, went to the classroom, talked, I could not do that remotely. If in fact it was a remote training, that would have been the end of it. So I believe that, just to summarize that, and I love the perspectives, Deji. I can't thank you enough for this CEO, inside the head of the CEO perspective, because it's key. A lot of times we come here and we're just chatting HR, best practice, SHRM survey, but you have allowed us go inside the mind of the CEO. And you're obviously an advocate of, it's not like somebody would think that you're an office-based CEO. You're not. I mean, your team is fully remote, but just to give everyone a sneak preview, even now you're working on a major project, and you are all lodged in a hotel for a particular assignment, because that if your team is remote, that assignment is there's going to be a high risk. So look at it. I mean, we have to bear in mind that this is situational. On a case-by-case basis, you have to look at your case, put yourself in the shoes of the CEO, look at the best interest of the company, ask yourself realistically whether you can solve these problems remotely, or whether they are in-house problems. And I just love the thinking around that. So do you have any final words of wisdom to us before we wrap up and send everyone off to continue their lovely day today? Deji.
Thank you much. So, Adra, it's always great speaking with you, and I'm happy to speak with everybody as well. Like I would say, remote is good, right? And it has its own use, but we should not forget, we should not get lost in the bubble. 99% of everybody, well, I made that number up, but it's very high, can't work remotely. So let's say that and not kind of disrespect the sensibility of others, right?
Yes.
And I wish everybody a successful end of the year.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I want to say thank you to the Kendall team again. Thank you for Deji for putting it together, for answering our questions, for giving us those insights, the Kendall team for putting this together. I want to thank everybody who was here. I hope your 1 hour was worth your lunchtime break. And I just want to remind you, anyone who is here, please look out for our webinars. Look out for the communication and join us in December for our annual HR Bootcamp conference. You'll be seeing Deji. Deji is one of our speakers again, and obviously a whole host of speakers. If you haven't registered to attend our conference, please, we will be looking forward to seeing you there. And just have a great day. And thank you, Deji, for that insight. And thank you to everyone here. Well done. And see you next month for another Stay Trendy webinar on another interesting topic. See ya. Bye. Thank you. Who is our DJ? Our music, please.